Andrea Reusing is a James Beard Award winner, and she's the owner of an acclaimed restaurant, the Lantern in Chapel Hill, which has been was recognized by Gourmet magazine as one of the top 50 restaurants, and a whole bunch of other awards. And what she's done in her book, Cooking in the Moment, is to take us through the seasons and help us with locally available North Carolina foods, go through the whole year with wonderful farm fresh dishes on our table. And we're going to ask her to share some of that knowledge with us as she talks about her book on North Carolina Bookwatch next.
Funding for North Carolina Bookwatch is made possible through the financial contributions of viewers like you, who invite you to join them in supporting UNC-TV, and by the North Carolina Humanities Council.
Welcome to North Carolina Bookwatch. I'm D.G. Martin, and my guest is Andrea Reusing. Andrea, thanks for coming, and thanks for this wonderful book, Cooking in the Moment.
Thanks for having me.
Well, is it fair to say, it's not fair to say that you're a newcomer to North Carolina, because you and your husband have been here for a while, and your children have all grown up here.
Yeah, that's true. He's been here since he was 12, and I've been here since I was in my late 20s, so a while. Yeah, for about 16,
and your children
17 years, I think.
Your children have Southern accents.
Yeah, I think there is that kind of neutral accent that many of us have adopted. People always say to me, you don't have a New Jersey accent. And then, in New Jersey, people would say to me, well, you don't have a Southern accent. So,
oh, good.
Right.
Good.
We're less and less defined, unfortunately, by accents, because they can be fun to hear.
Well, as we talked about in the introduction, your restaurant, The Lantern, which I think is since 2002.
That's right.
And so it's getting to be, it's getting to have been around for a long time.
Yeah, almost 10 years.
But was instantly popular, wasn't it? I mean, it was, and
we were very busy when we first opened, and we had to be. We only had $500 in the bank, so we were very
Tell us that story. Tell us that story.
Well, we ran out of money, so when we opened, we kind of had to be busy right away, and we were really busy right away, and I think that's largely because we were one of the only Asian restaurants nearby at that time, and so yeah. So
there are two directions in your restaurant in terms of the theme. One is tilting Asian, not absolutely set in any particular environment, and the other is lots of use of local, fresh, available foods of North Carolina and where you are. And I mean, how those things fit together?
They kind of started to fit together. When we first opened, I wouldn't say that our emphasis was as much on local as it is now. The emphasis was just trying to get open, stay in business. My brother was my partner when we first opened for the first 5 or 6 years that we had the restaurant. We did it together, and so we really just wanted to open a restaurant and not go crazy. And so I think as we were able to, we started to incorporate more foods from farms nearby as we kind of grew and as we had a little more time to source. And I think, in terms of just meat production, so much has changed in the last 10 years. Now all of the pork on our menu is local, and all of the chicken and almost all of the beef. So we've really come a long way just in terms of just meat production locally in the last 10 years that has allowed restaurants to really have meat on the menu that's from nearby.
Well, I want to back up, and I didn't really intend to do this, but all of my friends, many of my friends, to be really truthful, toy during their lifetime with two things. One is, I got to write a book about this, and that often doesn't get done. And then I'm going to open a restaurant,
right?
And it's better if they don't try that idea, because it's very tough.
Yeah.
And so we got you here. You can talk about both of them. But before we talk more about your book, talk about what you learned that first year. You were kind of, we need to open a restaurant, so you opened it, and there you are. What were some of the exciting problems that confronted you, other than the financial problem?
Managing 35 or 40 people was one of the big
Well, did you have 35 or 40 people and you only had $500 to start with? Or
Well, you know, over the next couple months,
the first
payroll, getting payroll, being responsible for that payroll, being responsible for expectations of customers. I think when we first opened, we kind of planned on being much more casual than we actually were, but I think that there was an expectation that we'd be a little bit more fine dining, and so kind of managing the evolution.
These sound like all good problems to have. You never teetered on the verge of going out of business because you'd been too ambitious. You just were successful.
No, I think we were pretty careful about the way we managed debt, and we were pretty careful about construction, and we, you know, GC'd a lot of the project ourselves and did a lot of the work ourselves. And luckily, you know, I still work with some of the people that were the first people that pulled down the drop ceiling that was in the restaurant beforehand and tore up the floor, and you know, so we were just pretty hands-on, and I think that served us well in terms of keeping the budget.
All right, I got to drag this out of you some other way. Now, all right, I'm an older friend of mine. Just comes to you and says, "Okay, help me. I'm going to start a restaurant."
Right.
And what do you say? And this person's a friend of yours too. You got to tell this person
right.
the truth.
Okay.
And so he says, "What should I look at? Give me some advice."
Well, I'd say that the pastime, which is a very popular pastime of talking about the idea of opening a restaurant, is a great place to just stay, because you can have all of that wonderful expectation and discussion and fun. Like we'd put this there, we'd serve this dish, you know, we'd
so your first
have
advice
this kind
is
of party. But I'd
talk
say
about this for a long time.
Yeah,
before
I'd say
you
that's
do
a
it.
pretty fun place to be, is talking about
All right, that's
it.
great advice. What's your second piece of advice for the person who talks about it and then comes back and said, "I'm going to do
Well,
it"?
I'd say work in a restaurant.
Work first
for at least a couple years in a restaurant.
Did you do this?
Yeah, I did. No,
Okay.
I worked in
And that was
restaurants
good.
in
That
New
was-
York, and I worked in restaurants here. So yeah, no, I think that's good to just kind of, sometimes our imagination about what something is going to be is not.
So if you've
really.
worked in the back of a kitchen and you see the confusion or seeming confusion and all the things that can go wrong rather than just what comes out, you're more likely to approach the project carefully.
Realistically, yeah, I'd say.
That's great.
I think so, yeah.
All right, well, I'm paid to talk to authors about their books. And so this is a wonderful book that is about cooking, but it's also a book of writing. And how did you what did you set out to do?
Well, thinking about writing a book, you know, it comes up when you're a cook and a chef, and you know, people want your recipes, and so I think often we'll email people recipes, and you know, sometimes the reaction we would get from emailing somebody a recipe for, you know, our fried flounder with garlic and chili sauce, and it's 30 or 40 ingredients, would be like, "Oh, okay, I think I'll probably just come back on Friday night and have the flounder." You know, I think the recipes at Lantern are very detail oriented in terms of
Your
technique.
recipes really are,
At Lantern they are.
I mean,
And I think
at the Lantern are complicated.
Yes.
And have to be done carefully. They're not candidates.
They're not candidates for a home cooking book. And so I think, you know, obviously we could have done a restaurant cookbook, and I think what was appealing to me about writing a book, though, was really kind of getting people in the kitchen and kind of, you know, creating something that was energizing and that helped people kind of get dinner on the table very quickly using ingredients from, you know, nearby where they live. And so that's what I tried to do in the book, is just assemble a cast of characters that are, you know, regular kinds of ingredients: turnips, squash, tomatoes, potatoes, etc., kale, chicken, pork, things that everybody can get all over the country. There's some special kinds of regional delicacies like figs and oysters and things like that, but the focus of the book is regular food,
So
you know,
you're
done very
known,
simply.
and you're recognized throughout the country. You're a James Beard Award winner
Yes.
for creating these complex rather than complicated. The complex taste that food. Now I'm using words that I don't even know what that these people who know about food, they really
call
appreciate.
themselves foodies.
Foodies appreciate. But when you decided to write a book, you rejected the idea of trying to teach people what you are well known in the foodie community for, but to do something else.
Well, I think that we've complicated, you know, food TV and foodieism, and this idea that we're kind of talking about food all the time, and many of us have become kind of food obsessives. I think that this has made cooking dinner more complicated and putting dinner on the table more complicated. And it's really changed our relationship to food. I have friends and I know people that kind of feel like it all of a sudden in the last 10 years or so, it takes special training or special skills or
you gotta go
special
to France
knowledge to just make dinner, have people over for dinner, or just cook dinner for, for your family. And I think, there's a lot of books out right now that are about simple cooking, and I think my book is in that world of this is not that hard, and it can be really fun. And, with an emphasis on good ingredients, flavor is really easy to get to pretty quickly.
Well, the thing that solidly brought that message to my attention, and because I was sort of startled, I thought this was going to be almost a chemistry book of how to prepare these sophisticated foods, and you sort of start out early in your book of telling me how to cook an egg in a brown bag. You want to? I mean.
Yeah. Well, when I was at Girl Scout camp, when I was about 8 or 9 years old, we prepared this incredible thing. We all came down to the fire, and there was no pans, no pots, nothing there except a pile of paper bags and a couple flats of eggs and some packages of bacon. And we were told to go in the woods and get some sticks and then sharpen them. And we all came back and we lined our paper bags with the bacon and cracked eggs on top and just held them over this campfire. And then, ate the eggs and bacon out of this kind of greasy paper bag with our hands, and it was just the most memorable, delicious, satisfying breakfast. And me
so
and
you
these
remember
girls.
this as an adult?
Oh yeah, and we talked about it for years. My friends and I that were at camp together. So I just thought, that's a fun thing. I'd done it with my kids, and just thought it was a fun thing to share about eggs, and eggs are one of my favorite foods.
Well, there are some great recipes there that may not be so complicated, but
that don't require going into the woods and sharpening.
Well, I've forgotten about the complexities of the brown bag, but that brought home the message that, hey, she's really going to tell me some things that I can understand. Another thing that was very helpful to me about your book was a recognition that many of us, or many families, have a tough time working and cooking. Mm-hmm. And so you give us permission and give us some ideas about what to do about, gosh, I didn't mean to do, about reusing food. Uh-huh. That's not a pun on your name. But about cooking beans or other things in a way that you can easily put them in the refrigerator and then the next day not have to cook a full meal. Tell us about your thinking about that and what your ideas are and to what extent you use that in your family.
Well, my favorite way to make dinner is to just kind of look at what we have in the pantry or look at what we have in the refrigerator and just kind of cook that way, because I think you end up making something that's really satisfying and really fun, but also you don't have this kind of pressure of every ingredient in the world you're considering. When you go to the grocery store to make dinner, you have everything. Everything is possible, and it kind of makes your cooking a little bit more complicated than if you just kind of look around at what you have. So I love pantry ingredients like dried beans.
Give me an illustration of what you might find in your refrigerator and how you might use them in a way that would be something.
Well, like last night for dinner, just making, just like very simple, really good quality, delicious fresh broccoli with some salami and garlic and chilies and a fried egg. Just very, very simple, something like that. Or just like if you have great white beans that you've cooked a big batch of during the week, you can make really good baked beans, very simply. You can make a really good pasta with ham hocks and rosemary and some roasted butternut squash with those beans. So, looking at food is kind of like you have these starting places where there's all these different directions you can go if you have some very basic staples in the house.
So you say, my recipes are great, but go make up some yourself,
I think that's the kind of confidence that most people will get once they do a couple recipes, themselves. And I think, we know people like to complicate things.
Well, let me tell you
right?
what I love. I love baked beans. And so you obviously like them too because you've got a great simple recipe. tell us about your baked beans recipe and your philosophy of how it, it comes about.
Well, there's sorghum in them and mustard and a little bit of tomato paste, and the beans are really good. We use these beans from Rancho Gordo in California, but any kind of white beans are really great. And
you buy dry beans, or you get them in a can, or do you get them?
Dried beans are really good because they're much more economical, and you're flavoring them yourself. And canned beans kind of tend to have a canned bean taste, and they're really expensive. So I think it's a good example of when you just
now, do I have to order them from California?
No, it's like you just get them from the grocery store, any kind of white bean. But the same recipe would work really well with our southern field peas or with lima beans. So now that it's lima bean season, lima beans would be great in that
recipe. Well, you've given us
recipe.
the ingredients, but the attractive part was the simplicity. What do you do? What do you do with all those ingredients?
Oh, you just toss them together and throw them in the oven. It's really simple. And if you eat meat, you can put bacon on top of it. A big slab, a big thick, thick cut bacon.
The bacon is an attractive feature for me, but of course, a lot of my friends would have to. My family would have to cook two separate.
Two separate. I think everyone's family these days. You have the two separate casseroles.
The other thing that is great about your book is that you take us through the seasons, and we could pick any season to talk about. Well, let's talk about summer first, because summer is the most fun, I guess, for you and for other people who have to put stuff on the table.
Summer is a really easy time to cook, I think, because everything is so flavorful just as it is, just buying it at the store, just buying it at the market or a stand. Everything is really accessible, and the vegetables are really tender. And so, like, one thing that I talk about in the book is just how simply salting cucumbers, onions, tomatoes brings out the flavor and kind of makes these things like even juicier and more delicious, and it kind of can serve as just like this launching pad for a lot of different really simple recipes that are just about salt and vegetables.
Easy to sell with tomatoes. All of us have, a lot of us, most of us understand that a tomato is about, that a ripe tomato, a good tomato, is about the best thing that you could ever get, no matter how much you paid. But with the other summer vegetables, you're arguing that maybe they're victims of over-preparation sometimes too?
I think so, or just kind of that, like, to take a really good fresh onion that's just been dug, like a red onion from the field, and it's very sweet, but it's pretty strong, and if you slice it very thinly and just sprinkle it with a little bit of salt and let it sit for 20 minutes, it becomes almost sweet, and it becomes a lot less hot, and it's great with a piece of smoked bluefish with a grilled chili, or with some cream cheese on a really good cracker. There's lots of ways that things like that can be used that we kind of overlook in our rush to complicate things.
A simple onion sliced thin so you could get 100 slices of things is
transforms things into something that's delicious but also simple.
With the authority of a chef who charges a fair value for her meal, she's saying, don't cook it, salt it and let it sit.
Yeah, cucumbers are the same thing. You can make a really easy relish with a fresh green chili and some mint and some garlic and some salted cucumbers pounded in a mortar and pestle. It's like the perfect thing for a piece of grilled fish. You can turn it into a green tomato, a green cucumber soup. Pickling is another big thing right now because there's so many vegetables out there, and so one thing that I'm really trying to encourage people to do in the book is not think about always canning when you're thinking about pickling, always kind of having to get out a big canning pot or heat up the kitchen by canning, but really preserving vegetables, all it takes is some salt, a brine, or some vinegar. And so there's lots of projects that you can do where you can pickle a vegetable, but just keep it in your refrigerator for a couple weeks.
So that you don't have to go through the.
You don't have to go through the whole process. Yeah, sauerkraut keeps for 3 or 4 months in the refrigerator. So there's lots of things like that in the book too.
What about fruits in the summer? What are your favorite ways to deal with the abundance of?
I love figs, and figs are just starting right now, and will go for a while. And one fig recipe is a pickled fig recipe from Edith Calhoun. Lee Calhoun's wife gave me this wonderful recipe, and Lee is an heirloom apple hunter and the author of Old Southern Apples, and a great writer, and documentarian of Southern food, and so the pickled fig recipe is great. We also do figs with like a little bit of turbinado sugar, just broiled with some fresh ricotta cheese. It's really good. Yeah.
Now, let's talk about meat.
Yes.
And most of us will go to the grocery store, and there are good meat markets there, but you're worried about maybe not getting the most value from, say, chickens, that the way chickens are produced for us might be flavor destroying, that they're not maximizing. I mean, you have some ways that you can get chickens that taste better.
Well, I think farmers market chickens taste like chicken a lot of times, a lot more than grocery store chickens.
What is it about grocery store chickens that make them not taste like chickens, and what's the difference? I mean, what do they taste like?
Well, I mean, I think that they're pretty bland, and the texture can be very spongy and not have a lot of flavor, really. And I think that the fat is kind of rubbery and bland.
Is it because they're breeded to grow?
Grow
up so quickly?
They grow very quickly. They're usually about only 40 days old, and so age also equals flavor in terms of flavor development in an animal. So, there's a lot of reasons.
Well,
it's the way they're processed. They're soaked in ice water, sometimes with chemicals in them, so they last longer. So, there's a number of reasons why supermarket chickens don't have the flavor of the chicken that people often will say they remember this kind of when chicken tasted like a chicken. And I think, chickens that live a little bit longer, maybe 12 weeks, 14 weeks, are from breeds that were bred for flavor rather than rapid growth, often tastes a lot better too.
What about cost?
Chickens farmers market chickens can be expensive, more expensive than supermarket chickens, but that's for a lot of different reasons. A couple of them are, it costs $3.50 to slaughter a chicken at a small independent processing house. So before a farmer's bought any feed or done any work on the chicken, they're paying $3.50.
Out of it. Yeah.
But they're really not that expensive when you look at what you can do with a whole chicken. A chicken at the farmer's market might cost $12 or $13, but there's a lot more you can get out of that chicken than a big bland flavor.
You like to pay a lot of money for birds, and you have a story about a Thanksgiving turkey. I mean, some of us are waiting for the sales to get the turkey for 39 cents a pound, and you're out there paying like $15 a pound. I mean,
I don't think it was that much, but turkeys can be big, so it adds up. It's always shocking when something's $80.
What's the most you ever pay for a turkey?
For a turkey, maybe about $100.
$100 for the turkey, and so what are you going to get out of your $100 turkey that I'm not going to get out of my $20 frozen turkey?
I don't want to diss a $20 frozen turkey because there's a lot there. There's a lot to recommend a $20 turkey.
Well, let's don't. But what's better?
But
what are you
a great thing, and I don't know, 100. I think you can get a really good turkey for $60, $70. But you get a ton of meat. You get that great moment in Thanksgiving where you sit down and you have this amazing smell that's coming out of this oven and this incredible
it's
bird.
Better if you.
I'm going to just keep going and let me finish because you asked me and I'm going to list what you get out of it. Okay, you get this incredible gravy that tastes like nothing and no kind of gravy that you've ever had before. You get sandwiches for days and days because you're going to want to eat that turkey again and again. You're not just going to want to throw it away. And then you get this soup that's amazing. When I look at a turkey, really you could get 40, 50 servings of something really delicious out of a $70 or $80 turkey. At $2 or $3 a serving, it doesn't seem like very much money.
Well, no, and this is missionary work. You've converted me. Because, I think we'll see at Thanksgiving.
Yeah, we'll see. That's when the birds are going to come home to roost.
Because if the bird is cheap, and then you get to the end and you're throwing away a lot of stuff. If the bird is expensive, you're kind of squeezing it to try to when you're thinking about.
And it's worth squeezing.
Yeah, that's right. And so that the broth that I might get from a less expensive turkey, a grocery store turkey, is not going to be as good in your mind as the flavor that you'll get.
I think you really taste the broth, and you taste it in the broth a lot because the flavor is just much more nutty. It's richer. It actually has presence. It tastes like something, and it's the kind of thing that you savor rather than just kind of like, oh, what are we going to do with that turkey carcass? Well, might as well throw it away.
This is just great. I'm learning so much. But I haven't even asked you, what's your favorite? What of all, do you have? I know you love all of these. But today, if you have to pick something to talk about that I might have missed.
Well, you know, I love a fresh ham. That's a delicious thing to do, and lots of farmers have big fresh hams, and they aren't very expensive at all, and you can get them with the skin on. And a great meal is to take a fresh ham, and you can brine it, or you don't have to brine it, but you can just throw it in the oven for 4 or 5 hours with the skin on it. The skin gets crispy, kind of like a crackling, delicious, almost like a pork rind kind of crust, really tasty, and the meat is very juicy, and you can carve that up, and that's great for sandwiches, great for a big special occasion. Wow. and it's fantastic.
Where do you get it?
Get it at the Carborough Farmers Market, at the Durham Farmers Market. You need to
Nina?
kind of make plans ahead of time with a farmer, but a fresh leg of ham.
Wow. So many things to talk about. And thanks for this book, Cooking in the Moment, that you've given us, not so that we can be so envious of you as a James Beard Award-winning chef of complex flavors, but as someone who teaches us to enjoy what we can do. It's just great.
Thanks for having me.
Andrea
Great to be
Reusing,
here.
thank you very much. And thanks to all y'all for joining us. I hope you loved this moment of cooking as much as I did, and I hope that you'll join me same time next week when I introduce you to another one of North Carolina's great writers.
Funding for North Carolina Bookwatch is made possible through the financial contributions of viewers like you, who invite you to join them in supporting UNC TV, and by the North Carolina Humanities Council.